This is the Daily Wealth Junkie Show, and thanks for joining us today. I'm Brandon Dukeman here with Will Harvey, and we've got an awesome show for you today. But before we get started, be sure to follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/groups/wealth junkies and to subscribe to the show so that you're not missing any of our daily shows. Without further ado, Will, let's get started with today's show. Who do we have today?
Yeah, thanks, Brandon. So today we have Tiffany Toombs. So she is a NLP master practitioner and trainer. I have no idea what that means, but she helps people that are stuck in self-doubt, self-sabotage, and she helps them clear out all that emotional baggage. And so I'm not going to say much more. I'm going to let her dive into her background and what all that is and how she got to where she is today. So thanks so much for being on, Tiffany.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. So can you dive in? Yeah, can you dive into your just how you got started and what got you to what you're doing today?
Absolutely. So I've been helping people in one form or another for as long as I can remember. Started a business when I was 14, doing fitness coaching and athletic training for the teams in my hometown. And my intention back then was really just to help people feel comfortable in their skin. And the best way that I knew how to do it at that time was through fitness. That ended up taking me to Australia. Actually, I went down to Australia after I finished college to work with a baseball team as their athletic trainer. And I definitely was pulled to Australia to have a little bit of a breakdown, which turned out to be a breakthrough. So while I was living in Australia, I had been dating someone for 3 years. And on the day that I found out I was pregnant was the day I found out that he had a girlfriend in another state. And my entire life collapsed.
Wow.
I then had a miscarriage. The stress of everything collapsing and not having the money to come home and see my family. I couldn't eat or sleep for 2 weeks. So my body miscarried the baby. And then I sunk to an even lower emotional depth. And all these limiting beliefs that I had had my entire life about not being good enough, not being worthy, nobody wanting me, they all started coming to the surface. And I knew where they were coming from. I was actually abused by my stepmom growing up. She was a domestic violence survivor. And my biological dad was the first man who never hit her. And so on the weekends when I was there, she didn't get as much of his attention. And so whenever he wasn't looking, she took it out on me. I got locked in closets. I got burned with curling irons. And at one point when I was 7 years old, she drove me to the outskirts of town and told me that she was just going to leave me on the side of the road for a stranger to come and do whatever they wanted to.
When you were 7, you said?
Yeah. So
Wow.
At 7, I begged for my life because that's what I thought. She had told me that strangers like to kill blonde-haired, blue-eyed girls, which I am. So that's what I thought was going to happen. And so I'd had all this stuff that I had developed between those ages. And for you guys and for the listeners, the bulk of the belief systems, both good and bad, that we have right now as adults were formed in our brain between the ages of 0 and 7. So I got all these beliefs about my worth, about who I could trust, about my lovability, my ability to keep people around or people wanting to be in my life between those ages when I'm being abused and what I thought left for dead. So that really played out in my relationships, and unconsciously I was choosing men that would be, essentially handing me a bouquet of red flags. And I'd be, oh, these are the most beautiful roses, just totally ignoring them. Right. And I think a lot of people do that as well, which is why I share my story of that. And so that really took me to hitting that rock bottom. And there was one point where I was actually suicidal. That really took me to a place of recognizing that I needed to dive deeper into my stuff. So I started seeing psychologists, therapists. That didn't really work. They just kind of brought all the stuff back up to the surface, and they were like, there, don't you feel better now that you've talked about it?
Right.
I'm like, no, because all this stuff that I've just forced down for so long is now on the surface.
Right. It's right there on your mind.
Yeah. Started working with life coaches and going to the rah-rah personal development events where you feel really good when you're there, and then you walk back out into the real world and you realize you don't really have a whole lot of tools to deal with everyone else who's negative and has their own wounds. And then started working with life coaches who just kept telling me what's done is done. The past is in the past. You can't change it. Just focus on the future. And I was like, well, I've been doing that my entire life, and it has not helped me get to where I want to go. So I ended up finding NLP and matrix therapies. NLP is actually what Tony Robbins is trained in. That's probably like the easiest way to say it.
Okay.
What it stands for is,
there you go. That's what I was going to ask.
yeah, I was going to say what it stands for is neuro-linguistic programming. So it's really the study of the brain and how the brain is wired, how our language, like the words that we use to talk when we communicate both with ourselves and others, how that impacts the belief systems that we have, the emotions that we feel, and how all of those things, our words, our beliefs, and our emotions create our behaviors and our habits. And so that's what I use now to help people rewire their minds.
Wow.
Yeah. Trying to.
That's an incredible background. So what age, when was it that you really, how old were you when you had the breakdown in Australia?
So I was 28.
28. Okay. Got
Yep.
it. And then from there, what transpired after that? Because I feel like we went back to when you were, around 7, and your stepmom was not doing the right thing. So what happened after that breakdown, and just give us kind of the timeline from there.
So I really I just took a step back from most people. I recognized that the way that I had been doing things wasn't working. I recognized that I had really settled in a lot of areas, both in relationships and just in my life, where I felt like, I remember calling my mom and saying, I feel like I'm getting dumber. And she was like, that's not even possible. But growth and continuous learning is important to me. But the whole time I was in that relationship, because I had settled, that wasn't really, something that was supported. So I stopped reading, and I stopped learning, and I stopped doing all those things that I was passionate about, which was another red flag in itself. And so I just took a step back. I started doing the therapy. I started doing the personal development events, the life coaches, spent a lot of time alone, meditating on a beach with my dog, doing yoga.
Nice.
And just spent a lot of time self-reflecting, and ultimately came to meet somebody who had their life changed by NLP. And I was like, I don't even know what this is, but I know I need to do it. And so I just started to dive in. I found somebody who was a reputable trainer in NLP, and hired her and took all her courses over the next couple of years, and just dived in and really committed myself to that practice of becoming a better version of me and healing all my stuff. Really, and it's really uncomfortable. It's probably one of the most uncomfortable journeys that there is. And it was the thing that gave me my life back. It was the thing that, I honestly can tell you that I don't know if I would still be here today if I hadn't gone on that journey, because the emotional trauma and the emotional baggage, I don't think people recognize how heavy that is. It's every morning people wake up, they strap this 200-pound backpack full of crap from their past, and you don't have to have been abused. It could be bullying. It could be just bad breakups. It could be parents who didn't give you the love or attention or affection that you needed, parents who got divorced, whatever it is. You're strapping all that to your back, and it's like you're going out to run the marathon of life, and you can't figure out why you're always so tired.
Right.
That's a great analogy.
So was there any breakthrough moment or one day or one incident that you remember that really just clicked and you decided it's enough, or this is everything's turning around for you right now? Or
So I guess the biggest moment for me that I recognized that I needed help was the point where I almost ended it all. So I
Mm.
was standing in downtown Melbourne, and there was all these cars going by, and I saw this cab coming. And when I was younger, I'd had like 3 of my dad's friends commit suicide all in the same weekend. So I was like,
Wow.
I
That's
kind of grew
crazy.
up with yeah, it was a very, very
Yeah, that's a
intense
rough
weekend.
weekend. Yeah.
Um, and so I'd kind of grown up with the notions of those things um, being selfish, right? Like that's what I kept hearing at that time, was how selfish those people were for doing those things. And so I knew that I couldn't um, do something that looked intentional to end it, but I also knew that I couldn't keep going with the emotional pain, and I couldn't see a light at the end of the tunnel at
Uh,
that point. And so I saw this cab coming, and I just made the mental decision that I was just going to step out at the wrong time. It would look like an accident. And I went to take the step and call it divine intervention or whatever. I couldn't move. My feet were like rooted to the ground. I couldn't move. And I was like, as the cab went by, it kind of took the air out of my lungs with it. And I recognized what I almost did. And that's when I knew that I needed to make that change.
Mm-hmm.
And that was probably the start of the uphill climb for me. Like that was the
wow.
rock bottom that I needed to be like, okay, no, I want to climb out of this hole.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, I would say that's probably as rock bottom as it gets without
Right.
it actually happening. So,
Yeah.
so tell us about where you are today and
So
what you have.
yeah,
Yeah.
so
Like
things
things have
are
turned
a
around.
lot different.
Yeah.
I've had some challenges since then. I got into business with the wrong people after that. But now I've moved back from Australia. So I'm now living in Dallas. I have a multi 6-figure coaching business. So I
Nice.
coach, I've worked in the last 2 years that I've been back in North America. I've worked with over 250 people one-on-one. I've spoken all over Canada and the US at events, running my own events, at other people's events. I have written a book called Stop Being a Selfish Bitch, which is all about that journey to self-love. And
Love it.
I have a couple other businesses that I run with my fiance now, around lead generation and just creating at-home work opportunities that are not MLM based. So things are a lot different now than what they were back then.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it definitely sounds like that. So you were mentioning that to get to where you are today, you really had to kind of dig at the root cause, and it was really really uncomfortable. What are some of the NLP practices or methods that you can give us an example of that's uncomfortable that would lead to a breakthrough or growth or whatever it may be?
So I think one of the most uncomfortable um, recognitions that everyone has to come to on their journey is that, and for me, I found it to be really empowering. Some people are, the glass half empty people find it even more so uncomfortable, is that all of our problems or all the challenges that we face have a common denominator, and that's us. And so for me, it was recognizing that all of my failed relationships had a common denominator. I was the person that was picking these men. I was the person that was deciding to be in a relationship with them. And even with my business partners that I'd gotten into business with 2 narcissists. And so when all of that fell apart, it was recognizing that again, I was the one who chose not to see those red flags.
Mm-hmm.
And so to really ask myself where that was coming from, a lot of people, what I find is that most people, and with New Year's coming soon-ish, people want to change the behaviors that aren't working for them. So I need to go to the gym more. I need to eat better. I need to stop spending my money negatively. I need to find a job that I actually like, whatever it is. Except most people don't recognize that our behaviors are really just a symptom of our belief systems. And
That's
so
good.
as soon as we start to deal with the belief system, then the behavior automatically changes. Otherwise, it's like trying to force a square peg through a round hole.
Yeah, so it's like you're just putting a Band-Aid on the problem. You're not getting to the root cause.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so I liken it to just going out and weeding your garden with a pair of scissors, where you just cut the stem of the weed off where it meets the soil. So the garden looks pretty for a day or two, but
Right.
those weeds are going to come back. So ultimately, the root of most of the problems with the 250 clients that I've worked with comes from beliefs about not being worthy, beliefs around lovability or not being good enough, beliefs around not belonging. So for me, not belonging was a big one. I didn't want to be rejected even more that than I had from my stepmom and my biological dad. And I'd been bullied in school and things like that. And so I didn't want that rejection. And so I just became a doormat for people. I became a people pleaser. And if I was doing everything for you, then you had to love me back. Except all that does is
Right.
create highly
It's
toxic
not the case
relationships.
at all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and now that you look back on it, like you said, you chose not to see those red flags, but now that you look back on it, did the red flags stick out? I mean, from right off the top, or?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and for a lot of people, like, the red flags is you meet someone and you get a weird gut feeling about them. And I used to always ignore that. And now, like, if my gut tells me, if I'm meeting someone and my gut gives me a weird feeling about them, then I keep them at an arm's length. I do some more research. Obviously asking the people that are currently in their life won't necessarily give you the answer, but looking at who used to be in their life and is no longer, and what's the reason for that. And my gut has not led me astray yet. So
Yeah, no, that's really good. It's like you find the person that's like, I don't get it. I just keep getting in these relationships and they end up not working out. What's the I guess I'm just finding these bad people,
Right.
and they don't realize that it's them.
yeah.
And I, looking back when I was in my crazy, drugs and all that stuff, that's totally me. Everything was someone else's fault. And it was never my fault. I never took responsibility for a bad grade on a test, or it was always somebody else's problem. So
I think society kind of perpetuates that, right? Like,
yeah,
and corporates and big pharma, they play off of that as well. Like, it's not your fault that you
right.
have this, but here, just buy this makeup or buy this car, and more people will like you.
Yeah, that's
And
so true.
it's the same thing. If somebody only likes you because you drive a fancy car, they're probably not really liking you for you.
Right.
Yeah, very
That
true.
in itself is a red flag.
Yep.
So you said you've got, a business that sounds like it's doing really well. Can you kind of talk to us about how you got started into that business and how it grew for you?
Yeah, so the study that I did down in Australia gave me the certifications for those courses. At the time, I was in business with other people running other businesses in Australia, and I I still had a belief system, I guess, that I couldn't do it alone, that I needed business partners. I wasn't smart enough to run my own business. And so I was just kind of coaching on the side. It was my hobby.
Coaching athletics or
Coaching people,
Okay.
like mindset coaching.
Right.
And I have a belief now that if you're not doing what you're meant to do, the universe will just like keep closing doors until you get the point and you start doing what you need to do. And so it turned out that my narcissistic business partners had been lying about some things in one of the contracts. And I had just believed, rather than reading the contract myself, I had just believed what they said. And then they were encouraging me to do specific jobs in the business that were actually in breach of that contract. So we got government funding, and as a director of the business, I wasn't allowed to teach courses. And they were like, "You're our best teacher, go and teach." So when the government audited us, they were obviously not at all happy that I had breached the contract. And so I was forced to resign from the 4 businesses that I'd poured my heart and soul into for 4 years, which also meant that I lost my ability to live and work in Australia. So I had to pack everything up, move back, and I had like a 3-month kind of soul searching journey before I left Australia as I was wrapping things up down there. And I'm from Canada originally, so I'm coming back to like small town in a very conservative part of the country that was just coming out of a recession. It's kind of like small town Texas in Canada. And so, people don't like talking about their emotions. I have friends and family telling me nobody is going to spend their money talking about their emotions. That's just not what we do. You should just get a real job. You'd be great at these things. And
Sounds
every time
similar
I
to
went,
what a lot of people hear, get a real job.
absolutely. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. You can still coach on the side, but you're
Right.
never going to make enough money to fully support yourself.
And you said,
And
watch me, I'll do it.
yeah, well, at first I was kind of like, oh, they're probably right. And then I'd go on the Indeed website and I'd look at all the job postings and I could just feel my soul dying. And that was the first time I'd felt like that girl standing on the corner looking at that cab again. And I was like, I don't think I'll survive this. I think I just have to give it a chance. So
Yeah.
I moved back with $3,000 to my name. And I just went all in, just day and night, just did everything that I could. I moved back at Christmas time. So it's actually a perfect time to talk about limiting beliefs, especially with New Year's resolutions. So I contacted every gym, every yoga studio, Pilates studio, spin studio, every studio that I could find, and offered a free 90-minute talk for their clients, their membership people, and their staff, just to help motivate them for the new year, help them reach their New Year's resolutions. And I left no stone unturned. I used social media. I didn't have any money to run ads, so I just really focused on putting out content that would help people change their lives. And from every talk that I did, I would get 1 or 2 clients, and then my clients would get results, which would get them, which they would give me referrals. So it just kind of grew from there.
That's awesome.
So what kind of social media you said you were creating content? Where were you putting it on social media, and how were you gaining traction through that?
So I'm predominantly on Facebook. I am starting to expand that a little bit more. I do a lot of live videos on Facebook, and then I'll just take those live videos and post them on YouTube. And I would go into Facebook groups, entrepreneur groups, women's groups, and I would just post. What a lot of people do wrong is they just say, hey, buy my stuff and then I'll give you the answer. I do the opposite. I say, here's the answer. And then people just naturally reach out to me and say, well, if you can solve that problem, then you can probably solve these other problems. How much is it going to cost me? And so that's what I do, is I just focus on showing people that I know how to fix their problem by solving it. And then that ultimately leads to either them referring someone to me if they don't have a need for coaching at the time, or them working with me themselves.
Very cool. So what's your vision moving forward with that, as well as everything else that you have going on business wise, and any books you're coming out with, whatever that may be?
So I am working on more corporate consulting right now. I'm kind of taking a multi-pronged approach, looking at working with athletes again, working with corporates, and then working with one-on-one. I have a lot of speaking gigs planned for 2020. Nice. And my ultimate vision is to empower 1 million people to live an intentional life that's aligned with the truth of their soul. I am working on my second book right now, which is called Pain to Purpose: Becoming the Hero of Your Own Story. And just
that's
talking
awesome.
to as many people as I can.
That's cool. I love that mission. It's a very intentional, very, very trackable goal that is sounds like it's meaningful. 1 million, that's a tall order, but
it is. And I'm okay with that.
Yeah, that's great.
That's great. So before we move on a little bit, let's talk about this Stop Being a Selfish Bitch book. What gave you the idea for the title, and what's it about?
So Stop Being a Selfish Bitch was actually my personal project that I recognized halfway through last year that I needed to make it a book. And so when I was going through that soul searching journey, figuring out what I was going to do, I was just journaling one day, and I get into these journaling spaces where I just write the words in my head, and then I read it back later and I'm like, that was me. But I get my best ideas from that. So I was just journaling like that. And I wrote down, I know that what I do changes lives. I've watched it firsthand. I've seen people's lives changed from this. And if I give into my own fears, my own doubts about not being good enough, not being able to survive, whatever, then all those people who are out there waiting for me to share my message so they can find me and change their lives will never find me. And so I just wrote down what would happen if I took that fear, that self-doubt, I put it in a box up on the shelf, knowing that I can come back to it anytime. But what would happen if I just put it up on the shelf and I went all in on myself? Just for 365 days straight, I went all in on myself. And so I got amazing results. I had a couple articles published in different publications like Addicted to Success, Elephant Journal. I actually had one article go viral on Elephant Journal last year with over 100,000 reads. Last year alone, I presented to over 600 people, had 11 businesses bring me in to talk to their staff or their clients, had 151 clients. So,
and that's all that's all mostly from writing that book.
So that was from me just acting in the book. So that was from me like going all in on myself. And then I recognized that I needed to share that with more people. So the book is really that journey. Like what would happen in your life
if you went all in,
decided to go all in, if you put all that fear and self-doubt away. So the book has two parts to it. All the things that will challenge you, the obstacles that will pop up, whether it's the haters, the family and friends who doubt, money, time, all of that stuff, your own, your self-sabotage. And then the second part of the book is here's some activities to help you get really clear, to start clearing out some of your emotional baggage on your own so that you can go after it.
That's
awesome.
Great.
I love it. And let me ask, have you noticed, what does writing a book for you do for your business and your credibility and your story?
Even though anybody can self-publish nowadays, so many people still get stuck in like that writer's block. So as soon as you tell someone I've written a book, like in terms of getting on stages or getting more clients, it totally like 1,000% increases your credibility.
Awesome.
It's like a new business card. If you can just say, oh, like I'll just send you my book. People are like, what?
Yeah, you got a book. That's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
So very cool.
Yeah.
All right, Tiffany. So we're just going to hop right into our moments of truth section here. It's the same 7 questions that we ask all our guests. And I'm just going to lead it off with, who is your success role model?
My success role model, I look up to Tony Robbins a lot, which may be a bit cliche, but we're in the same area. So
no, he's phenomenal. So what's your biggest success?
My biggest success would probably come from just watching my clients gain closure. I've had a couple huge changes happen. We've had somebody reverse type 2 diabetes.
Wow.
Had someone who was in their 50s, and she was sexually abused growing up by 2 family members, had never been able to have an orgasm. We did 7 sessions together, and then all of a sudden things have changed, and she's a very happy woman now.
Yeah.
Cool.
So yeah, it's just watching the change that my clients get to go through.
That's a great change. What's a typical day for you look like?
I get up in the morning and I do some journaling, some meditation, post my morning posts on social media.
What time do you usually get up?
If I've been traveling a lot, it's a little bit later. Okay. Usually around the 6 a.m. mark. Go for a walk with my dog in the morning for about 45 minutes and listen to an audiobook, and then just get into whatever podcast interviews or coaching clients I have for the day.
Great. What is your favorite quote?
My favorite quote is from Thomas Edison, and it is, if we were to do all the things we were truly capable of, we would literally astound ourselves.
Yeah, there'd be a lot of things getting done.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like we don't even know our potential. We don't even know.
We have no idea.
Yeah, that's great.
What are some of your hobbies?
Golf. Love golf. Got back into it this year with my fiance. Traveling.
Get out sometime. If
yeah,
I'm ever in Texas.
Sure. You let me know. It's going to be my first winter golfing here in Texas, but apparently the golf courses only get shut down for like 3 days of the.
I was gonna say
the
winter
year.
in Texas.
Yeah.
Sound like those two words go together.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
There's a reason that I moved from Canada and not my fiance moving up.
That's funny.
Yoga, meditation, just traveling, hanging out on a beach somewhere.
Great. What's the best business book that you've read or listened to, since you do audiobooks?
I think a lot of the best business books that I've listened to are actually around the mindset side of things. The top three that stand out, and I don't know if I could choose between them. Stealing Fire, which is about getting into flow.
Okay.
Relentless by Tim Grover. He was Michael Jordan's trainer.
That's a great book.
Yeah,
it is.
I read that a while back. That's an awesome book.
Yeah.
And the last one I would say is Can't Hurt Me by David Goggins. And that just really like shows what we're truly capable of. Like the feats that he's accomplished in his life are ridiculous.
Yeah, his background is, from abuse and things like that too. So I haven't read the book, but I've heard it's a great book.
I've heard the audiobook is better. I actually read the book for that, but he does the audiobook and he throws a bunch of extra stuff in.
I'm sure if he narrates it, it's going to be a good book.
Yeah.
So last question here. If there's one key piece of advice you could leave our listeners with about achieving success, what would it be?
That the only person who has to be able to see your vision to start is you. Because when we step outside of our comfort zone to start chasing things, we pull the people in our life outside of their comfort zone. And so that's why friends and family tend to doubt us or lash out at first. They will come around or they won't. They'll just find their way out of your life naturally. And that's okay. But the only person that needs to see that vision is you. And as soon as you start taking steps, like you don't even have to see the full staircase of how you're going to make it happen. I don't necessarily know how I'm going to get to 1 million people. I just know that as long as I take a step forward today, the next step will reveal itself to me, and things show up in the craziest ways. So just start doing it.
That's great.
You got to get started somehow.
That's right.
So Tiffany, how can our listeners get in contact with you or
find your book?
Yeah. Find your book or.
So my book is on Amazon. If you just type in Tiffany Toombs or Stop Being a Selfish Bitch, the I in bitch is with an asterisk, otherwise it won't come up. Otherwise you can find me on Facebook, Tiffany Toombs, or my website, www.bluelotusmind.com. It can link you to all my social media where I have a ton of free videos and free content out there.
Awesome.
That's great.
Well, Tiffany, that wraps things up for today, but we do appreciate you being on with us and sharing your story. I know that's probably not a very easy story to share. But again, thank you for sharing your story and being with us. And our listeners, don't forget to follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/groups/wealth-junkies and to subscribe to the show so that you don't miss any stories like Tiffany's and any other future shows. Tiffany, thanks for being with us today, and we appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tiffany.